Welcome to Dealmakers Nation. I'm Brittany Rose. I'm really excited to be doing this first podcast with Marcus Goodwin. He is running for City Council at large for DC. And this is actually the second time we're recording this because I just did it and didn't press the go live button. So welcome, everyone. We're very excited to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So let's go back to the questions I've already asked you.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I'm a DC native. I grew up in a working class family, the fifth of 8 kids in my family. My mother's a DC public school teacher. My father is a scientist. And growing up in the family that I did, I learned how to build consensus in a large group, but also saw a rapidly transforming district. And that was Washington, DC, that had a big demographic shift over the past 30 years that I've been living in the city. But also, we've seen a lot of growth and construction. Cranes are omnipresent in the sky in DC. And growing up, I always wanted to be a part of that change and really to guide it, because I knew that people depended on housing for their quality of life. They depended on development for jobs, and they depended on getting a high quality education to get them to the jobs that they wanted for their future. And when I meet with kids every day, I know that that is continuing to manifest with the upcoming generations.
And I would say that you're already, even though you are not in this position yet, you have already started to do the work in terms of building affordable housing. Tell us more about your experience as an affordable housing developer and what that was like.
So I have worked on projects that are exclusively affordable housing and age-restricted affordable housing, meaning that for people ages 55 and older, they are able to qualify to live in those units. And it's been a great program because we use the HUD definition for affordable housing. That's the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, that looks across our region and finds the median income for a family. And we base how we price those housing units on it, so that people's income, only a certain portion or percentage can be allocated to the cost of housing. And that's 0 to 30% of the area median income, 30 to 50%, and 50 to 60%. And these projects provide deep affordability that keep working class people in DC. That's firefighters, that's teachers, that's emergency medical workers, that's police officers, people who really need to be able to stay in the district in spite of the rising costs of the market prices.
So as a lot of our deal makers are newer investors, and they are probably DC natives or DMV natives. And I think it's important to make sure that development is not only happening at the large scale level, but that smaller investors have a role to play. Tell me more about how regular newbie investors can get involved in the redevelopment of DC.
Well, I think one thing is buy your block. You know, the neighborhood that I grew up in was predominantly African-American in the Columbia Heights community, but it's not that way anymore. Really, when I got enough ability to save up capital, I bought a house near my mother's house. And for me, it was an opportunity to own in the district that I grew up in, but also to continue to reinvest in the community that we've been a part of socially, culturally, economically. It was a community that we were part of building to what it is today. And now being able to give back and know the people in the community. They're people who have been there for a long time, maybe they can't give it to their kids. Got to be aware of that. Got to be social. Got to be in tune with who's in your neighborhood. But also, if you live in a city like DC, there are tax sales. If people have an outstanding tax liability, or they're delinquent, or they've straight up abandon the property, the district puts properties on a list so that you can claim with a down payment on the tax delinquency on the property, ownership of it, with a period for the person to repay what they owed. But if they don't, which typically they don't, you own that property. So I've seen from that an incredible number of people find their next home or find their next investment. And many municipalities, states, and counties around the country have that once-a-year tax sale program.
As somebody who's very familiar and active in the investor side, and also very concerned and cognizant of protecting our most vulnerable communities, how do you see DC balancing that well and not so well? Like, what do you think the right plan of action is, and what is the plan of action right now?
So the slogan for our campaign is people over politics. Any policy, any regulatory framework that I want to propose, I want to put the people first. So it's a very delicate balance, focusing on the rights of people in their housing, which is one of the most paramount rights that we have to protect, and really one of the highest and most protected rights across the United States of America, as compared to other nations. But I would also say that we need to support our entrepreneurs, and we need to ensure that there's an opportunity for them to take advantage of any outstanding, underutilized, unutilized real estate in our communities. Because if it's unused or underused, it's not generating property taxes, it's not livening the community that it's in, it's not well cared for. If someone can buy it, they can redevelop it, they can fix it up, they can put it in a better condition. That's a benefit to the whole community. It's a benefit to the district. It's a benefit to the government. It's a benefit to neighbors. I know in my community, there's an abandoned house that everyone in the neighborhood wants to see someone buy, whether it's a family or developer to build it, to buy it and redevelop it. We want to see something happen because we want our community to be beautiful, and we don't want any divested or discarded properties just laying there and not adding any value to us.
Currently, what are the policies in DC that are standing in the way of investors, and what do you think the direction should be?
So there's been a lot of conversation about the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, TOPA, which was inspired by legislation that exists in New York City now. And from that legislation, it gives tenants the opportunity to organize around how they will purchase a property if their landlord chooses to sell it. So they get first right of refusal in that process. However, it's not a perfectly written law. It's been challenged in court time after time. So I want us to continue to look at those laws because they've posed a lot of challenges to the people living in the housing and the people seeking to buy or sell the properties. We also have rent control laws, and it's good that we have rent control in the District of Columbia. And frankly, I want to see us improve our rent control laws and expand them. But I think it's something to be cognizant of as an owner, because we are very, very serious and stringent about respecting the rights of our tenants in rent control buildings. So it's another consideration to make if you're seeking to buy or own a property that's subject to the current rent control regime, or could potentially be incorporated into a controlled rent environment.
So that definitely affects affordability, and I think that's an important topic to stay on. You've had experience developing affordable housing. Do you feel like that there is enough affordable housing in the city? How can budding entrepreneurs and investors get involved in that process? And what do you think needs to happen to expand it if it needs to be expanded?
Well, our DC mayor has set forth a goal that we want 36,000 new units by 2025. And frankly, we're behind production schedule to get all of those units produced. So if people have great ideas for how to get more affordable housing units built in the district, or market rate units with a strong affordability component, we're welcoming them. The district wants people to get more units up because frankly, we have a supply constraint issue where 400 new people every month on average are looking to move into the District of Columbia, but we don't have enough units to accommodate people continuing to come in. That's partially why market rate rents have gone up consistently the past two decades every year. And we're only contributing to it by not having an environment where people can build the number of units that will match the demand that people are looking to relocate into the district. So there's a very welcoming environment. There's a very welcoming zoning and planning office in the district that wants to see responsible development with a strong affordability component coming in.
So for new investors, what does that look like? Are you talking about large scale development projects, or are we saying that small investors can create, multi-unit townhomes in the city, and how do they do that?
So there's a lot of conversation now about the historic character of our neighborhoods and communities. We're looking at single family zone communities, and there are a lot of limitations on exactly how much density you can deliver or build. But there are also areas, our major avenues and thoroughfares and a quarter-mile radius of our metro stations, that we do encourage more dense development opportunities where there usually is a 1 or 2 story property that could go up 2 or 3 more stories. So I do think that there are good opportunities in our commercial areas, our major avenues, boulevards, thoroughfares, that we need to start to see more of these units start to come up, because we're just living in a supply constrained environment, because the district is a very attractive, fun, inviting, and engaging place, but we don't have the number of units to meet the number of people who want to live there, and we can't frankly turn them away.
So I don't know a lot about the back office of permits and things like that in the city, in DC, but from the conversations I've had, it can be incredibly difficult and a very long process to do things like condo conversions, which among investors is really important and a very big draw to doing business in the city. What can be done with that? What can be done to help make that a more investor-friendly situation? Is that something that would be in your realm, or is that something that you've considered? Is it important to the city? Speak on that for me.
So I think it's important to me and important to many people that we graduate people from rent to ownership. And if there is a condo or co-op conversion opportunity so that people can start to build generational wealth in a unit that they would be living in anyway, that they would be paying into, but not owning, I think creating an opportunity for conversion to condominium or co-op ownership is a great way for us to introduce the concept to people who maybe would not otherwise seek it to own the unit that they're living in. So I think that there are a lot of opportunities, both through single family or multi-unit or multifamily projects or sites or buildings, to get the kinds of conversions going to ownership units. And I think we have a welcoming environment in the district to get more of that to happen.
What are the constraints? What are the things you don't think that the district is doing well right now in order to make it an effective place for investors and make sure that it's affordable for its current residents?
So we produce a lot of our affordable units through a housing production trust fund. This trust fund is funded at least $100 million every year, which the district has made a consistent commitment to. However, with COVID, we had an additional add-on that was pulled back to add into the general fund coffers for the district. I would like to see more investment. I mean, any gap financing that we can provide to generate and produce and deliver more affordable units, we should seek to do so. So I'm profoundly interested in ensuring that the district continues to make those investments and frankly, makes more investments in getting affordable units up in DC.
Tell me more about that fund. So who has access to that fund? How are those funds allocated? Who does the construction? What are the guidelines and parameters among investors to get into that opportunity? What does that look like? And you mentioned gap funding, and that's really interesting. Can you talk a little bit more about that too?
So what it is gap financing. So the fund provides gap financing so that people don't have to seek equity that needs an 18% discounted return. They can seek this gap financing to deliver affordable units, have a fixed rate of return, have a fixed out sale per unit price based on the area median income, and it's a competitive process. There's an application process that's released sometime in the beginning of the year, and by the spring, summertime, people know if their application has been accepted. That means that investors have to own the property or own the land, and then just be seeking to close on construction, have advanced architectural plans, advanced approved density, approved zoning, approved use, community approval, community support, and then that makes you more competitive to be winning the bid for this gap financing. And it has to be a project that the market wouldn't otherwise bear. That's really the standard for why we want to get these units built with government funds. So frankly, it's a great opportunity, but it takes a really savvy, experienced developer to be successful in applying for it, because a majority of the people who apply on an annual basis aren't allocated funds.
Okay. And how many units are those projects typically? Are they smaller projects or larger projects?
Could be 50 to 300, like
anywhere in there.
It depends on how much you're asking for.
Okay.
Because the fund is fixed at $100 million. So I would say, most is like 50 to 80 units, somewhere in that window.
That's interesting. Let's go back to more about your experience with affordable housing development. Can you tell us more about the project? And so from what I know about you, you are not technically a real estate developer, right?
I am.
You are. Okay. So I knew you were in commercial real estate. I didn't understand your role. So tell us more about your role in commercial real estate, what you do, and then tell us a little bit more about how you got there. And for anyone else who wants to get there, what path you took.
Yeah, so I graduated from college in 2011. I started my first 2 years in New York City on Wall Street, focusing on the investment bank side of the business, and really was passionate about housing the whole time. So really wanted to be on the operator side, not just giving loans for people to do projects, but being, what the first person who interviewed me described as being the cowboy, meaning you are out in the vast unknown, you're finding opportunities, and you're creating a vision for what you wanted it to be and what you wanted to see. So really my experience since 2013 has been on the acquisitions and development side. From the acquisition standpoint, it's finding the site, finding the opportunity, gaining site control, closing on acquisition financing, buying the property, moving it into the pre-development stage, finding an architect, finding a contractor, working up plans, working up community support, getting the highest and best use to be delivered to that site, and then working collaboratively with team members to get the site designed, get the pricing set, value engineer the pricing so that you can put together a financial model that ties, that has returns that you know and understand, and ultimately getting the community approval, getting the government approvals, getting the investor approval to go ahead and start to put a shovel in the dirt and close on construction financing. So it's really, the financing, the financial modeling, the community engagement, the management of the architects and contractors, and other, related consultants like attorneys, and getting it to a point that the shovel's in the dirt and you just got to show up to the site every day and see that the contractors are doing what you told them to do. And they're building the building that you had designed.
So how did you get to this place? From college, you graduated, obviously. So what did you study in college?
Urban studies.
Okay.
So the study was focused on really the intersection of government, housing, and real estate, and public-private institutions and how they interact, the built environment of the city.
So do you feel like that's how you learned to do this job, or did you get to the job and learn it when you were there?
I feel like if there was a full set of tools that I have today, that I picked up every few months a new tool and I sharpened it. And I picked up a new tool until today, I can walk in and look at a site and build a financial model for a 60-unit building without even having it designed and tell you what rents it's going to have to achieve, given what I think the cost of construction will be to get a building up in this site, and what hurdles there will be and what timeline we're looking at. So, it's not like I woke up one morning and I knew it, but it's a learning process, and people can be in the business for 30, 40 years and still have a lot of questions and scratch their head trying to figure out how to do a deal. But that's why you surround yourself with smart people. You have the attorneys, you can talk to. You have the contractors you can talk to. You have the architects you can talk to. You have the planners that tell you, or the community people, what the process is going to be like to get the approvals that you need. And you blend all that together to know and understand roughly what you can expect.
If you were starting from ground zero, from knowing nothing as a new investor, how would you get started? What would you do? What do you need to learn, and where do you learn it from?
Well, the biggest lesson, and I'll take it from there, is expect the unexpected. Like, things are going to go wrong on every project. Things are going to, like, 80% of things are going to go wrong. 20% of things, and you won't even notice it because it's only 20%, but 20% are going to go as you expected. 80% is going to go wrong, and you're going to have to step up and respond. That's why having a good network of people to really have a good conversation with, to coordinate with, to bounce ideas off of is very important. But I would say, there's a few ways in. Some people start off as finance people and become developers. Some people start off as construction people and become developers. Some people start off as architects and become developers. Some people start off as management people and become developers. You can start off at any of those places. I kind of came in the finance route and went through that door. Some people start off as engineers, but to an extent, you kind of got to know the construction side of the business to come in that direction. But I'd say the construction side is the most important. It's the biggest part and component of any budget. The finance you can figure out. The legal implications you can figure out. The design, it's pretty important, but you can figure it out. And you can have a smart person, work out a solution for you if you painted yourself into a bad corner. The construction side, there ain't no workaround. Like, you got to have a real good sense of all the costs you're going to incur. Because one thing can blow an entire budget and put you in a position that you lost your money. Mm-hmm. And more so than any other of the implications. So I wish I had started out with a better construction background.
How would you have gotten that construction background? Is there a job you would have taken, or are there deals you would have sought out?
I think being an estimator, being a construction manager, again, if you want to do a job, go for that job. Don't go for sideways ways in, but it's very important to understand construction, to understand cost, to understand building materiality, to understand where people source different materials from. I just like to keep in touch with knowing what roof materials there are, what glass materials there are, what solar infrastructure there is. Like, these are things that you got to be cognizant of to have the most innovative, beautiful product or project that you can possibly build. And now I'm going through a home renovation. So all that knowledge is being poured into the place that I'm going to spend the most time. So I'm excited about that.
That's awesome. So thank you. That was a lot of good information. I hope that anybody who's interested in becoming an investor, or a developer rather, will, take that in. Can you first let's go back to development just a little bit. We know that there's a lot of talk around the Washington football team, the development that might possibly come around that. Tell me about the redevelopment of that area, and then also tell me about other redevelopment projects within the city that you think are something that people should be keeping their eye out for.
Yeah, so I'll talk about the football team stadium. There was RFK Stadium, which served as the longtime home to the Washington Redskins, now the Washington football team, while they find a new name. And it's a pretty ideal site for a sports stadium. I think nobody would doubt that. I think the problem is the cost of coming back has been proposed that the district should step up and pay for it. And most residents are against that. And to be honest, it's pretty well reasoned. And that's having a football stadium, which there are only 10 home games guaranteed a year to be there, leaves 355 other days of the year that there isn't program-specific activity. So certainly with district funds, there's a strong distaste, which I support. There's a strong distaste to having government money going to build that stadium. But we saw the LA Rams, their owner with private funds was able to build that stadium and it's one of the most beautiful, if not the most beautiful, new stadium in the National Football League. I think we're going to have to come to a community consensus around how we're going to make this a space that's activated more than 10 days a year, but actually activated on a consistent annual basis. And there's some good examples from around the country of stadiums that aren't just football stadiums, but they can be a concert venue, they can be a boxing venue, they can be the high school state championship football game venue, baseball. We have a stadium that was built 14 years ago that has done remarkably well and contributed a lot back in taxable revenue. So we know that sports stadiums can be a positive to the community that they're in, but the nature of the game is that you don't play that many games because it's so taxing on the body. So I'd like to be a part of that community discussion to see what we can do. And frankly, if football were to be able to work out to come back, I love it.
What other areas in the city do you see are seeing the most redevelopment, and what are kind of the hidden gems, the up and coming areas that you think people should pay attention to?
Well, I think depending on what people are looking for, I would just look at the demographic profile of where young professionals are moving and seek to find opportunities there, because those are communities that you're more likely to have a property that you can find that you can get someone of means or even of an affordable profile with down payment and financing guaranteed from the district or from federal sources or from the military to buy them a property. I'm sure you've seen a lot of the redevelopment around Union Market and Florida Avenue. I think that neighborhood is just undergoing a lot of rapid change and transformation. They got a Trader Joe's in there. That's a community that certainly I would, look for opportunities around and really be aware of what's happening there. I think anywhere that there's a metro is always going to be at a premium. So I would be cognizant and keep my eyes open for anything that comes up for sale around there. And I would say just being well networked, being well resourced is the absolute best way to find opportunities to work, to do deals.
Awesome. So I want to know more about your vision for the city in terms of not only housing, but the things that affect everyone who lives in the city and so also affects anyone who develops or invests in the city.
So I think I started off a little bit in the beginning talking about the core focuses for me being housing, education, and jobs. When I talk about housing, I'm focused on affordable home ownership opportunities because we do build a lot of rental housing, but we don't build nearly enough ownership units. So I want to support more gap financing, down payment assistance to get people into ownership units to start to build generational wealth. I also want fairer standards for underwriting because we know that Black and Latino home ownership far lags behind white home ownership to the tune of 27 to 30% on average. So I also want to focus on education. When I talk about education, I know the opportunities that transform my life were being involved in after school and out of the classroom experiences to be able to explore my creative energies and get to learn more about what I liked in the world. And being a football player, painting, playing the viola, being a part of the performing arts, these were all the transformative, changing experiences that I felt, I saw, I went through that really put me on the path to where I am today. And while I don't make money doing any of those things, it really helped me in my maturation and growth process. So I want a minimum funding guarantee for all of our schools to have a robust set of offerings outside of the classroom before and after school, including tutoring and mentoring resources to get our young people on the educational track that they need to live up to their dreams. And finally, the focus on jobs. One thing that is just incredibly sad to see is the continued high unemployment rate for Black and Latino youth. And I think a great way for us to bridge that gap is to provide job training and job placement in the vocational trades, because we need to see more people who are working these construction sites looking like us. We need to see more residents. And frankly, we haven't built the depth of a workforce to be able to perform on these jobs. So I want to help us step up and address that gap.
Perfect. Well, those are all my questions. Is there anything you would like to add? Anything that anyone considering voting for you should know?
I think that no matter where you live, no matter what you do, 2020 is the most consequential election of your lifetime, from the top of the ticket to the bottom. So I encourage everybody, know what those names are, know who these people are, know what values they represent. If there's someone that will align with you, will represent you, will bring you to the table, that's the kind of person you should be stepping up, voting for, encouraging your family, your friends to get out early and to vote, because your vote is your voice. So I'd like to encourage people to just learn more, find the best way, and make a plan to vote. It's not just going to happen by chance. We didn't just wake up and put our shirts on by chance. We made a plan. We went through and actively went through that process of doing it. So make a plan, step out to vote, tell your family, your friends, your community.
Terrific. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed our interview with Marcus Goodwin. And if you have any questions, please send them on any one of our Facebook pages, Facebook groups. It'll be reposted on our Instagram and YouTube, and we'll get those answers for you. Have a great night.